We begin tonight with the latest twist in the tariff tale, another change to US President Donald Trump's policy. Late on Friday, US Customs and Border Patrol quietly published a notice explaining that smartphones, computers and other electronics imported into the United States have now been exempted from Mr. Trump's 10% global tariff on most countries, and of course those much larger Chinese import taxes. Meanwhile, global stock markets have reacted cautiously today after the US granted temporary tariff exclusions on electronics, including those imported from China. Stock markets rose in Europe, echoing gains in Asia, where many tech stocks rose sharply. However, the dollar weakened and the price of gold reached a new record high, reflecting continuing uncertainty. Mr. Trump's exemption covers at least 20 product types, accounting for 23 of US imports from China, and is some relief for electronic manufacturers. But correspondents say any gains will be limited, given that President Trump has warned that levies were still likely at some point, and that he plans to impose tariffs on semiconductors over the next week.
That's right, but the tariffs will be in place in the not distant future because, as you know, like we did with steel, like we did with automobiles, like we did with aluminum, which are now fully on, we'll be doing that with semiconductors, with chips, and numerous other things. And that'll take place in the very near future. And it'll happen very fast. It'll all happen very fast.
Do you know what rate the semiconductor tariff?
I'm going to be announcing it over the next week.
Donald Trump. Well, in a related development, China's President Xi Jinping is in Vietnam on the first leg of a three-nation tour of Southeast Asia. He's called for greater economic ties. He'll also visit Cambodia and Malaysia in what Beijing calls a trip of major importance to regional stability. Well, for analysis of all the latest tariff-related news, I'm joined now on the line from Memphis, Tennessee, by Matthew Fox, a senior markets reporter with Business Insider. Matthew, thank you very much indeed for joining us. So first of all, let's start with that trip of Xi Jinping to Vietnam, and of course he's going to other major Southeast Asia economies. What's your reckoning of what's going on there?
Well, I think it's clear that they see an opportunity to try to shore up support from other countries that are getting some whiplash from the Trump administration when it comes to trade. So I think China sees this as an opening to strengthen its ties in the Asia region, and we'll see if they're successful, because there's a lot of confusion right now coming from the Trump administration with regards to tariffs.
And talking about confusion, I mean, what's your take on the latest Trumpian U-turn? Do you think this is about the concern for the US consumer, or is it more about the big tech bosses who are so close to Mr. Trump?
Probably a combination of the two. I imagine the White House is dealing with immense pressure right now from the technology CEOs that are probably telling the White House that the math behind the tariffs might not make the most sense, especially when you think about the facts. Shifting to the consumer. Trump in part was elected because of inflation here in the United States, and he promised to bring prices down. So if you levy pretty high tariffs against consumer electronics like smartphones and televisions, the consumer is going to feel that price increase pretty dramatically. So I imagine it was a mix of both things that drove the decision for the exemption. The question now is, how long will the exemption last? We're getting mixed messages from the White House spokespeople, and I think everyone is just looking for some type of certainty. So that's still lacking.
Well, that's a very important point because, I mean, there's still unpredictability and businesses absolutely hate that. I mean, you've still got companies unsure of what Mr. Trump's next post will be about, and that unpredictability may well extend for the next 4 years of the Trump administration.
I think we saw during Trump's first administration that he sometimes governs by tweets or social media posts. So I expect that to your point, to continue for, throughout his administration. I think the big surprise is Trump has always been viewed as a very pro-business, pro-economy type of president. And a lot of his actions recently go against that. So I think investors and business people are trying to reckon with what exactly Trump's end goal is and whether that will work in favor or in opposition of business interests. But as we've seen, he can change his mind pretty quickly. So, we have a 90-day pause on a good deal of the tariffs that were announced about 2 weeks ago. So to that point, we have about 90 days of uncertainty until we find out what happens next.
And we mentioned in the intro that this had been announced rather quietly. I mean, they left it to the Border Control Department, didn't they? It didn't come from the White House. I mean, does that indicate a sort of climb down? Is Mr. Trump being criticized for appearing not to plan out this strategy in detail?
Yeah, that's a big question investors have, is just how methodically planned out were these economic decisions that can have such a massive ramification across the world. And you can infer based off of a lot of the changes in decision making that there might not have been all that much planning into this. And, that's not good for confidence. At the end of the day, we want consumers to feel confident about their finances. We want businesses to feel confident about their business. And when you have so much uncertainty coming from the government, it's hard to get that confidence. So hopefully they have gotten the message that they need more clear messaging, more clear communication, that everyone's on the same page with their messaging. And we'll see if we get that going forward.
And just looking at the broader sort of economy of the United States and indeed the world, I mean, what's the assessment at this point of what all these sort of tariffs and policy shifts, what sort of impact that might have on the US and the global economy?
A lot of the research coming out of Wall Street from macro strategists and economists is, in 2 words, not good. I think the big debate is if we'll see a recession or not, but I think consensus is that we will see a slowdown. Maybe we'll still see positive growth in the low single digits, but it will likely be less than if we didn't have these tariffs in place. But that's going to take, a few months, a few quarters, a couple of years for us to kind of look in the rearview mirror with that hindsight to see what really happened. I think the encouraging note is that, at least in the US, the consumer is in the best financial shape they've ever been in historically. So they do have some breathing room to weather any potential economic downturn as a whole. Of course, there are some parts of the consumer that are weaker than others. But, we'll have to see. And ultimately, I think it will all hinge on whether these tariffs are permanent or whether they are simply a negotiating tactic for future trade deals to be announced.
Indeed. And in terms of the immediate term, your assessments would be that many small businesses as well as large tech corporations will be sighing with relief at this interim point.
For right now, I think so. I think, prior to the pause in tariffs, we didn't know if this was a negotiation tactic or not because of all of the messaging coming out of the White House that said it's not a negotiating tactic. This is permanent tariffs. Deal with it. So the reversal from the Trump administration goes against that, which is a sign of relief. It speaks to the fact that, some people can get through to the Trump administration and try to convince them that maybe there's a better route than tariffs. So hopefully those conversations are ongoing. And we know they can change their minds, which shows some flexibility. Down the road, this could be more of a blip if they didn't go into effect and were more of threats. And for now, as we saw with the big stock market rally last week, that's what investors are betting on.
Matthew, I want to thank you very much indeed. I know you've had a very busy day and you've still got a busy day ahead of you, so we appreciate the time that you've taken to talk to us. Matthew Fox is a senior markets reporter with Business Insider. He was talking to me on the line there from Memphis, Tennessee.